Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode, I'd like to ask you all a shameless favor. If you could take a minute to rate the podcast 5 stars on iTunes and leave a review, it would really help us get the word out about the show and help others find it. We'd also like to invite you to join the conversation. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover, send us an email at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can either write in or record your suggestion. Either way is fine. Who knows? You may be featured on an upcoming episode. Now, on with the show.
The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
Often on social media or via email, people ask me what they can do to help with a certain cause. This has happened after a number of our episodes, including one I did with Ora Lasko and my wife Shira about raising a child with genetic diseases. It also followed a lobbying episode I did with Rabbi Yitz Frank. Those, by the way, are episodes 21 and 13, respectively. When people hear about a cause they care about, or they hear about something that reminds them of a cause they care about, they often want to know what they can do to help. Well, this week on the Jewish Living Podcast, we bring up another worthwhile cause to fight for, Israel advocacy, with my guest and fellow contributor to the Queen's Jewish Link.
My name is Moshe Hill. I am a political analyst and columnist, and I'm here today to talk about NORPAC.
Moshe and I will be discussing the upcoming NORPAC mission to Washington, D.C., and what you can do to help out. Additionally, since I have him sitting here, I'll press Moshe on a few political issues directly related to today's Jewish community and his thoughts on the seemingly endless Democratic primary. Moshe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you became politically active.
Well, I became politically active probably around 6 or 7 years ago. I started getting into politics, didn't really think about it until then. So I think that what I always like to tell people, when I talk to people in high school or college, I say, you know what, I didn't get into this until I was in my late 20s. So I was just listening and learning and getting more involved and everything. And around 2 years ago, actually, NORPAC is the thing that got me politically active. I moved to West Hempstead. I started going to NORPAC, which I heard about for years but never participated. In my second year at NORPAC, I met somebody on the trip that said he just met the congressional candidate for our district. So I volunteered for that campaign. I started writing for that campaign website. Then my good friend Izzo over here got me connected to the Queen's Jewish Link, started writing for them, started writing for the Daily Wire, started writing for JNS, and just been going on since then.
All right, so we're going to get into a little bit of your other political leanings later on in the interview, but I want to focus the first part on NORPAC. So first of all, what is NORPAC? What does it stand for? Because people don't know that it's an acronym. What does it stand for? And what does NORPAC do?
So NORPAC is the Northern Jersey Political Action Committee. It is a pro-Israel advocacy group where their big thing is their annual mission to Washington, where once a year for one day, around 1,000 people from New York, New Jersey, and other areas go down, take the days out of their work, take days out of their retirement, take days out of school, and just go down to Washington, meet with 90+% of Congress to talk about pro-Israel issues. They push bills, they push particular pieces of legislation, they push for support for the president's agenda, whoever the president might be, and it is a bipartisan group. They meet with anyone who will meet with them, and they will be happy to take a meeting with any member of Congress. We just want to be able to talk about the things that matter to us. As American Jews, as Americans, we care about Israel. And we are there as Americans, we are there as volunteers, and that's what we do once a year.
So you said 90%. The other 10% are those people that don't want to take meetings, or are those other reasons why you might not meet with them?
Sometimes they are people who just say, we don't want to take a meeting. Sometimes people say, we really can't, we don't have time. I'm not in charge of the meetings, but when I went to the kickoff meeting amongst NORPAC this year, they said a lot of the meetings, they just happen last minute. The last couple of weeks, people are like, okay, let's get the meeting in, because sometimes members of Congress, they, don't look so far into their calendars. They don't really get the timing down. We try to get all the meetings set as much as possible. Sometimes you can't make it, but you know what? You get as many as you can.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of things that NORPAC kind of fights for in a general sense. So pro-Israel legislation, president's agenda. Can you get a little bit more specific with what you're pushing for when you go meet with these congressional representatives?
Absolutely. I think one of the great things about NORPAC is that it really pushes some of the fundamental change that you see in Israel over the course of the past year. I mean, it's been going on for decades at this point. So I know that one of the really great things that NORPAC is very proud of is that NORPAC helped push through the Iron Dome Support Act in 2013, which guaranteed U.S. funds to help Israel build the anti-missile system. Everyone knows about Iron Dome now, but back in 2012, 2011, it wasn't really a thing that anyone knew about. And when I'm saying anybody, I'm not talking about the public. I'm talking about members of Congress. Nobody knew about it. And it was brought up at a NORPAC kickoff meeting. One of the NORPAC meetings that you have before the mission to Washington is people bring up legislation and say, okay, what bills have been brought to the Senate floor? Who can bring those bills? What legislation are we trying to look? So somebody brought it to the attention of the group and said, hey, I read about this thing in Israel, the Iron Dome, and I think we should really push for it. So they got it. They brought it to the Senate floor, to the House, to the Senate, and it got passed and pushed and increased funding for every year. And I mean, I think we all know how many lives that saves. That's a huge accomplishment from NORPAC.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
Oh, wow.
I could keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in 2007, they said we helped the Senate promote the very first U.S.-Israel Energy Cooperation Act. And Israel is now more energy independent than it ever has been. I mean, it's just all part of these big things. They pushed in 2012, 2013, they successfully promoted the United States-Israel Enhanced Security Cooperation Act, the United States-Israel Strategic Partnership Act. I mean, this stuff, the list goes on and on. I mean, I know that I've gone the last 3 years. This will be my fourth time there. And I've spoken about, just increased security, helping combat BDS, helping fight Hezbollah, helping fight Iran. It's just, we push these bills. We try to get co-sponsors. We try to get people to vote for it. And this is, as Americans, we care about Israel and we want to see it prosper.
I should have asked this at the beginning, but how long has NORPAC been going? When did it first get started?
Around 23, 24 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time. This is why David Steinberg, who's the guy who's in charge of a lot of things, Dr. Ben Choak is in charge, David Steinberg is in charge. When I spoke to him in advance of this, he's like, you want me on the show? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I could handle it. And he's like, okay, he trusted me to come onto the show,
That was his
appreciate.
mistake.
It really was a mistake. But this is why, because he knows he's been there since the very beginning and he knows all of that kind of thing. So David, if you're listening, I hope you're not embarrassed. But yeah, it's been going on for over 20 years. It's really a great organization.
All right, so walk me through a day of the NORPAC mission.
So I live in West Hempstead, so our day begins at 5 a.m. We meet in the local shul to daven. We get on the bus and we start driving. We get there to DC around 11:30 if we're lucky. And there's usually a plenary session somewhere in DC. It's been in the same place the last couple of years, but they have a plenary session, which is basically a bunch of pro-Israel members of Congress. They speak to the crowd. Everyone tries to go in, listen to members of Congress talk. You usually listen to a couple speeches. You get lunch, and then you're off to Capitol Hill. You get your list. Usually at least 3 days, you get a list of the members of Congress that you're meeting with. Sometimes it changes day of because it's so crazy down there. And you meet with people. You go to your meetings. There's always a group of maybe 7-8 people. You have a team, a group leader. I was a group leader the last 2 years. And it's your job to basically get to your meetings on time and discuss the talking points. So around a week before the mission, NORPAC sends around to all their group leaders, to everyone who's signed up for the mission, the talking points memo, basically 7-8 pages worth of data and material of the bills that we're trying to push, the legislation we're trying to get passed. And then you do some research. Who is the person you're meeting with? Are they pro-Israel? Are they anti-Israel? What's their voting record? You have to do all this stuff. thank God for, smartphones because I do a lot of this work on the ride down. It's a 6-hour ride. I got to do something.
Yep.
So I do a lot of research on the way down, and we meet with them. I usually meet with 3 or 4 members of Congress. A lot of times it's their aides because sometimes they're in, they're voting and they're in session or whatever. Meet with their aides. But it's very funny. Some people are like, oh, you just met with the aides. The aides do a lot of the work. They make sure that the stuff gets passed along. And, there's thousands of pieces of legislation. And members of Congress do not know a lot of what's going on because, honestly, nobody can know a lot of what's going on. You have so much legislation. And the aides are the ones that say, this is what you should put your name on, and this is what you shouldn't put your name on. And so it's a very important thing.
Where do members of NORPAC come from? Is it generally the Northeast, or is it around the country?
Yeah, New York, New Jersey area. I think there are some that come from the Baltimore, Maryland area. I don't know how many fly in from other places around the country in the mission to Washington, but it's mostly in this area. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned a lot of the things that you talk about in Israel. Does NORPAC talk about anything domestically when they're meeting with members of Congress?
Well, we talk about enhanced cooperation that we can have with Israel. I mean, it is a pro-Israel organization.
Okay.
And so I think that one thing that was really big last year, because unfortunately Israel is becoming more of a partisan issue, which we are desperately trying to prevent. I think that it strives very hard to make sure that Israel remains a bipartisan issue. And so one of the big things last year was to basically talk about the shared connection that Israel and the United States have. Shared values, shared history, shared love of freedom, of democracy, of freedom of religion, freedom of speech. And, I think that's, you may think that that's a pro-Israel thing, but I look at that as an American thing as well. I think it's a good thing to remind everyone, whoever's talking, that these are values that we all share.
So what are the conversation topics on the docket this year that NORPAC's going to be pushing?
So it's a little too soon to tell at this point. Usually the talking points come out a week or two before, and it's the mission to Washington is in May this year. So it's a little too soon to tell what's going on, but you know what? There's a lot of things to think about, with Iran, Hezbollah, with BDS. The BDS movement is always, what happened in the UN yesterday. Well, on the day we're recording this.
Right.
So what happened in the UN a few weeks ago, whatever. But no, the UN put out a list of like 120 businesses that do business in Judea and Samaria that the UN put on a blacklist and basically saying you should boycott these companies. They're not saying boycott the companies. They're just saying these are the businesses.
Right. To clarify, it's not that they do business there; they operate out of there.
They operate exactly. Right. They operate out of there.
Coca-Cola does business there. They're not on the list.
Yes. There's actually a very interesting thing I saw that General Mills is one of the companies that operates out of there. And, I saw somebody say basically like, hey, members of Congress, if you promote BDS, General Mills is going to take a hit on this, and they have factories in your districts. And or they have, that's one example. But these aren't Israeli companies, a lot of them. A lot of them are international companies. General Mills is just an example, but there's a lot of international companies that operate in Judea and Samaria because it's literally it's the middle of a huge economic hub. I mean, Israel is one of the strongest economies in the world, and you have really great people over there. You want to build a successful brand in that part of the world. You do it in a place where it's safe and secure and a good place for your employees to live. And I don't think companies should be punished for that. So, and that could be on the docket this year, but we'll find out.
Well, it's one of the things about the BDS movement that I've seen. They don't really have an exact definition of who they're boycotting. A couple of years ago, they put things on Sabra, things which are no longer owned by even Jewish people anymore. It's owned by Pepsi.
I know.
So it doesn't seem like they're just saying, "Oh, this looks Israeli-ish.
I know.
Let's put something on that."
I mean, listen, if they want to knock the everything that came out of Israel, they'll literally be signing their own death warrants because so many medical advances came out of Israel. So if you wanted to decide, okay, I'm not going to take any medical advances that came out of Israel, good luck to you. I mean, it's not going to work out.
Always a classic argument. Let me ask you a question. I mean, not that any of the other things that I've been talking about haven't been questions.
Okay.
But What's the difference between NORPAC and APAC? APAC's obviously much bigger,
Yes.
but what are some of the actual differences between the two organizations?
Well, I think APAC, the way they operate is very different. So I think APAC is more of a general, like, these are the things we're pushing. We have this big conference every year. We invite people to come out to it, but it's more of like going, it's pro-Israel from the group to the public and using, or working with members of Congress to accomplish that. Whereas NORPAC, we take the message directly to Congress. I think a lot of people don't even know what NORPAC does or know it exists, but it's like so many things that APAC promotes is because of NORPAC. I mean, NORPAC, I look at it as the spine of everything that is pro-Israel. I think everything like you can't even move in the pro-Israel world without NORPAC doing all the hard work. So I think that NORPAC goes to the members of Congress. They put in the hard work and they see everybody. I mean, APAC, what do you have? You have a bunch of members of Congress, presidential candidates that come and speak to the conference. It's a wonderful thing. It really is. But I think that when you have 1,000 people come down from the New York, New Jersey area going to members of Congress, and they see that, I think that members of Congress see that people are taking time out of their lives to push for something that they believe in. That speaks volumes to these members, and because they know how hard it is.
All right, so you spoke about the different types of governmental officials that you're going to be meeting, the different types of congressional members or their aides, and you spoke about there's differences between pro-Israel and anti-Israel records. So what's the difference between the way that you approach someone who has a record of being pro-Israel versus anti-Israel?
And it's incredibly different. I mean,
no, obviously it's going to be different. I'm asking you, what are those differences?
Let me give you some examples. So I went to one congressman. This is my first year, and he literally just came back from a trip to Israel. He loves it. Okay. He just like went on vacation there. He loves it, and we literally didn't have to like talk about even the talking points. I mean, we did. We mentioned them. We said, and he's like, I think he was already. I think with that year we had 4 pieces of legislation we were pushing. He was already a co-sponsor on 3 of them. And the moment I said to him, you're not a co-sponsor on this, he literally turned to his aide. He's like, get me on that. And she's like, already done. And so and that was done within the first 3 minutes of the conversation. So we just talked about Israel, and it was great. And we talked about where we've been, and this was a group of like 8 or 9 people with the congressman. And, he told us where he went. We said, oh, we've been there. We traded stories just like you would if you anywhere else in the world. If you went to any country and you met somebody who also went to that place, like, oh, did you see this thing? Did you see that thing? And we just talked about it. And that was a great experience. And thankfully, that's been a lot of my experience with there. I mean, the past 3 years, I've spoken to a lot of pro-Israel people. Anyone who is quote unquote anti-Israel, they don't outright say, I'm anti-Israel. They basically, they like to use the Socratic method in a way of like questioning, like, well, don't you think that the Israelis and the Palestinians are, they're having a real hard time too? And I think in that case, the best thing to do is you got to provide broad context. I wrote about this actually a while back. I think that what a lot of people don't hear is that, the Palestinians have a lot of enemies and the Israelis are not on the top 20 on the list. I mean, they have a lot of people within them that's keeping them down. And I think that's not what the members of Congress hear. I think what they hear or what they see is you have the oppressed and the oppressor. And, like Linda Sarsour literally said this recently, that she said, when you have the oppressed and the oppressor, you have to side with the oppressed and you can't humanize the oppressor. And she's referring to Israelis. You can't humanize Israelis. And first of all, besides the fact that, she's a ridiculous anti-Semite, the idea that, it could be viewed, the entire conflict in that area can be viewed in such simplistic terms is quite foolish and I think naive. And I don't think she's that foolish or naive. I think that she's trying to manipulate a narrative. And I think that a lot of people, members of Congress, they're dealing with a lot of things. They're dealing with their own constituency. They're dealing with very broad domestic issues, very broad foreign issues. And Israel is one of 30 things you're dealing with. And so maybe they just hear one side of the story. So it's our job as when you come here to assume that they're not anti-Israel. They just didn't hear all sides of the story. They're not fully nuanced in the entire thing. And that's part of what we have to do.
What happens when somebody says, what about the Palestinian people? What's the response to that?
Well, what I would respond is, who are the biggest enemies of the Palestinian people? And who is really keeping the Palestinian people down? What's going on there? And the fact is that their biggest issues of the Palestinian people are Hezbollah, Hamas, Fatah, Mahmoud Abbas, everyone who's trying to turn those people into political pawns in order to defeat the Israelis, lying to them and saying, no, don't worry. One day, you'll be going back to that house that your great grandfather had back in what is now, a city of 300,000 people on the other side of the country, which used to be swampland. But you don't worry, you're going to go back to that. And they're lying to their people. They've been keeping them in refugee camps for generations, which is unheard of in human history. And that is, I think, number one, you have to push that idea that the Israeli people, that the Israeli government are not the enemies of the Palestinian people. I think it's Dennis Prager says this all the time. If the Israelis put down their guns tomorrow, there would be no Israel tomorrow. And if the Palestinians put down their guns tomorrow, there would be peace in the area. I think Israelis just want peace. And I think you got to really make sure that members of Congress understand that.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Golda Meir coined kind of that idea.
Was it?
And I think.
Well, Golda Meir said, there will never be peace as long as they hate their children. They hate us more than they love their children.
That's right. That's her.
That's what it is.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who coined that phrase. I don't think it was
Dennis Prager.
I don't think it was Dennis Prager, but he could parrot it. It's totally.
All right.
It's totally copyable.
Well,
If I'm wrong, my apologies to Dennis Prager.
Yeah, I'm sure he listens to this podcast.
That's right.
Yeah. He'll listen to this episode.
So somebody listening to this episode, or somebody's not listening to this episode, who wants to get involved with NORPAC, what are the steps?
Well, it's very easy, actually. You go to norpac.net, you sign up. You basically you go to norpac.net, you sign up, you tell them you go to the mission to Washington is the big thing. This is, I think 99% of the people who are volunteer for NORPAC volunteer on 1 day a year, and it's all volunteers. Everything. I don't even know how many paid employees they have. Not too many. But it's all volunteers. It's people put in their time, and these are regular people with jobs, and they take time out of their lives to do it. So what you do is you go to norpac.net, you sign up. Right now, until March 15th, they have their early bird pricing. The pricing covers the cost of transportation down. You got to take a bus. It costs, they do food. Once again, this is all volunteer stuff. So you sign up, you tell them, where you're from, what neighborhood you're part of. I am like most mid-sized to large Jewish communities have a bus already going. So they'll tell you where the bus is if you need to. I know that, in Long Island, some people drive out to West Hempstead and drive from like Belmore, America or something like that. And they come and join our bus. So you take the bus down and, you'll meet up with a group leader. A group leader will tell you what to do. If you don't want to talk, by the way, you don't have to talk. You could just being there helps.
Right.
You do not have to talk to anyone. You could just sit there and just listen. And by the way, I think it's a great thing to do with parents and kids. I think that a parent going with a teenager, I think the minimum age is 12 or 13. And until 18, you have to be with a parent.
Okay.
Over 18, you can go by yourself. But I actually can't wait. I have a 4-year-old who's my oldest, and I have and so I have 3 kids, 4 and younger, and I really can't wait to go with them to NORPAC because I learned more about how government works on these days going to Washington than I did in school. And I don't know if that says more about me than the school, but which is possible. But I think that's just hands-on. You learn by doing. And you want to know how a bill becomes a law? This is how a bill becomes a law. And so you sign up, you volunteer to go, take a day off from work, take a day out of your retirement, and take a day, like bond with your kids also. You got teenagers, go with them. This is important stuff, walk the walk.
Before we move on to some other topics, anything else do you think is important for us to know about NORPAC?
You know what? I would like to add that a lot of people come up to me and say, what can I do? What is it that I can help or do anything? And this is a really good way to do it. I mean, it is a day out of work. It is a long day. It is a tiring day. You will feel amazing at the end of it. And I just want to tell everyone who is even thinking about doing this kind of thing, there's a million reasons not to do something. Oh, I got work, I got my kids, I got, all these responsibilities and everything like that. Yes, that's all true. None of that's going away. It'll be there on the day after NORPAC. It'll be there the day before NORPAC. Take a day, do something. You'll feel amazing and you'll be doing good.
Good. All right. So let's move on to some other things. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that this second half of the interview, this is not a reflection of NORPAC.
No, it's not.
This is a separate part, and whatever is said from this point on is Moshe Hill talking.
Yes.
On behalf of Moshe Hill. Not on behalf of NORPAC.
NORPAC is a bipartisan organization that works with every member of Congress. Moshe Hill is a
partisan hack. No.
Accurate. No, I am a conservative. I am biased towards the right side of the political aisle, and I do not let my opinion be hidden.
All right. So on that note,
okay,
anybody who wants could probably find your articles online. You've written for the Queens Jewish Link, the New Jersey Jewish Link. You've written for Daily Wire. You have your own blog. You're active on social media. Mm-hmm. They could find what you talk about.
Yes.
And I've read a lot of what you say. We write for the same paper.
Yes, we do. And thank you for that connection.
Yeah, you're welcome. I do like to say that I kind of made Moshe Hill.
You do like to say that.
I do like to say it. I don't know if it's accurate, but I like to say it.
I guess on the Mount Rushmore of people who made me, you may get second tier.
All right, I'll take that. The top 8.
There you go.
Awesome. But I don't want to focus on a lot of the things that you write about because people could find those things. I want to focus on some of the political things that go on a little bit more behind the scenes that focus more specifically on the Jewish community.
Okay.
All right. So we just spoke about NORPAC for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about some more domestic things.
Sure.
All right. Let's start with this. A few weeks ago on my show, I had on Assemblyman Daniel Rosenthal.
Oh yeah.
All right. From the district where actually our paper is based.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up the point of why it's important for Jews to register as Democrats.
Yes.
And they're voting in primaries. They're oftentimes in a lot of the districts that Jews live in. There's no Republican opposition on the ballot. There's no if there is, there's no chance that the Republican's going to win. It's basically been decided that the D is going to win. So his point was basically,
as Nancy Pelosi said, a glass of water with a D next to his name would win in some of these districts.
That's right.
Referring to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's
That's right.
district.
So his point is that if you want to have a say in the election that's going to be in your district, register as a Democrat. And basically when you vote in the primary, you're voting for who the representative is.
Yeah, that the primary is more important than the general election.
Right. I'd like you to make the case as to why somebody should not do that and register for what they believe. If they believe that they're Democrat, register Democrat. But if they believe that they are at heart a Republican, register Republican.
Absolutely. I actually hear really both sides of this, and I struggle with it. I would never register as a Democrat on principle because I am a Republican, and that's just something I wouldn't do it even to, make sure that we keep someone who is virulently anti-Semitic or anti-Israel or socialist or anything like that out of Congress or in the local state assembly or anything like that. I do think that it is an interesting tactic to take to say, okay, let's make sure that we, at least by the general, we have 2 good options. The case that I would make to not do that is because I don't think real change could happen if you basically play that game. I think real change can happen if you're on the ground, if you're making the case to make real change. I go to a lot of Queens Republican Club meetings because I try to interview candidates on both sides of the aisle. I did an interview with a couple of challengers to some current members of Congress, and I meet with the people. There's a lot of energy in New York City, in Queens, on the Republican side. Is it enough? I don't know. Queens, there you have D plus 29 districts. I mean, that means they're blowing them out of the water. But you get a D 29 plus 29 district in 2020. Maybe by 2022, it's down to 20, D plus 20. Then maybe by 2024, it's D plus 10, and so on. I think that you got to make the change. And, that's what conservatives do. We don't make big change very quickly. Sometimes it takes a long time. And I think that if you register as a Republican, or however you feel, but I'm just saying.
If you're a conservative and you register as a Republican.
If you're a conservative and you register as a Republican, I think you're making a statement to the parties, to both parties, that they should pay attention to this district. I think that both parties get very complacent if they think that one district is either too red or too blue. I think that people pay much more attention, and I'm talking about party leaders, I'm talking about members who are trying to do something for their communities. I think they get much more active when they know that their next election is on the line. So if they see that it could go either way, they're going to make sure they do something for you. If they see that they're going to win no matter what, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to listen to this guy. I'm not going to get the lights changed. The street lights changed is because I'm not going to work hard for that, because what's the difference? I'm not going to make sure the road is paved, because what's the difference? I'm going to win an election anyway. But if your seat is up, they're going to get that road right. Paved. And that's a big deal.
My argument has always been a little bit different. Now, I'm talking to you as a little bit of a hypocrite. I'm not registered for the party that I most affiliate with.
Okay.
But the argument that I would have always made was, there's always a question of, why should I vote? Does my vote really matter?
Yeah.
And like, oh, come on, if I don't vote, is that, am I the swing vote? That's the same type of thing with a registration. Am I the swing? Oh, if I register as the party that's in the minority, in the far minority, is that going to matter?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no. But if you say that, and he says that, and she says that, and all these people say the same thing, then there's not going to be a real change. Same thing with registration. Same thing with voting.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so funny because I remember like joking around when I was younger. Like I said, I didn't get into this until I was in my late 20s, and when I was in high school and whatever, and we were first starting to like register and vote and do all this kind of things. I said like, yeah, what's the big deal? Like, if I don't vote, and like, well, if you say that and you say that and you say that, I'm like, well, no one else is saying that. I'm just saying that, like, I'm not speaking for anyone else. But it is true. I think there is a certain aspect of that. There is a certain complacency that people have. We talk all the time about, Donald Trump won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote because, and I talk about this a lot of times, that, there's probably, he lost by what, 3 million votes?
Yeah, a little more than 3 million.
You think in between New York and California and New Jersey and all these big, huge blue states, there aren't, a number of people. I'm not going to guess how many people, but how many people are just like, my vote doesn't matter. What's the difference? So I'm not going to go vote. And they would have voted for him. And he probably would have lost the state anyway. I'm not saying he would have won the state, but he may have gotten close in the popular vote. He may have even won the popular vote. And now there's a lot of states going around saying, well, we're just going to give our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. And I joked around today, if you look at those states, they're all blue states, every one of them. So that means there's a chance that Donald Trump wins 50 states if he wins the popular vote.
Right.
So, if you're in New York, I think he lost by 1.5 million in New York, or 2 million, a wide margin, 100%. Right. Maybe he would have lost by 1 million. And then, but
you could say the same thing in the very red states, in Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana, like the more red states. You could say the same thing, that the voter turnout for the blue side isn't as strong. But I think that if you change the electoral college, it changes completely changes the dynamic.
It completely destroys. It destroys the fabric of the country. The fabric of the country is the United States of America. I mean, every single state has a say, and if you take away the electoral college, you basically take away 43 states say in what is going on, and I think that would really tragically harm the United States.
All right, so I want to get your take on the Orthodox perspective on conservatism versus libertarianism.
Okay.
All right, so my big thing that I've always been working on, and I don't know if you have an opinion on this, I'm just going to ask you.
Okay.
All right, the concept of libertarianism is basically leave me alone. If I do something to harm somebody else, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, leave me alone. Conservatism is a little different.
Yes.
So
they align on a lot of issues, but there's certain things that they do differ. Yeah.
So would an Orthodox Jew rather line up with libertarianism, where I can practice my religion and nobody could make any laws at all that would infringe upon that, versus conservatism, where you're fighting for a little bit of a change, but there is always that aspect of, well, if they decide that your religion is now against the norms, is that something that we should be worried about?
Well, I would disagree with your premise right there, because I don't think conservatism would does that. I don't think that because conservatism really is talking about the initial foundation of the United States. It's talking about the ideology of the United States, and freedom of religion is sacrosanct in the United States. Thank God. And I think that that's not where conservatives and libertarians differ.
Well, let me clarify what I was
Yeah.
saying. All right. So a religion that exists right now that uses, I'll give you an extreme example, uses human sacrifice.
Okay.
Okay. The American government would not allow that
No.
because
I don't think libertarians would fight for that either.
I agree with you.
Because it's
I agree with you.
human
I'm giving you an
sacrifice.
extreme example.
Well, it's
Okay.
murder. I think
Right.
even
So
libertarians think murder is wrong.
I'm agreeing with you. Let me give you the example. Okay.
Yeah.
So we would all say that even though we have this freedom of religion, but human sacrifice goes too far to that, so that this would not fall under freedom of religion because it harms other people.
Sure.
All right. Let's say it comes out long the way down the road that something like bris milah, circumcision, that is actually harmful to the baby,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't do it. Medicine comes out, says you're not allowed to do it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. According to the conservative theory, then
Mm-hmm.
on that, they might be more likely to back a ban on something like that, whereas a libertarianism might not.
I don't really see that. I hear what you're saying. I think that because that's more of a social issue than a political issue. I think in terms of social issues, I think many conservatives line up much closer to libertarians. But you're saying like some conservatives that are against certain social issues that libertarians are just haven't cared about. Certain drug issues and marriage issues and that kind of stuff. But I don't see that's where the divergence is.
Okay,
between
so
the
where do
conservatives
you
and
see the
liberals.
divergence?
I see the divergence in basically, I would say that the most extreme libertarians are so leave me alone that they don't care about like abortion, for example. Like they're like, everyone's got a right to choose. What's the difference? That kind of thing. Whereas conservatives, many conservatives, I wouldn't say all conservatives, because there are some conservatives who fall into this umbrella as well. But many conservatives are pro-life because they view it from the viewpoint of the baby. They don't look at it from the viewpoint of the woman. They view it from the viewpoint of the baby, and the baby is a person, so you can't kill it. Whereas libertarians, really would say, what's the difference? No, they wouldn't be that cold, but they would basically say like, it's her thing. She has the right to what she wants.
Kind of my body, my choice type of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And that's basically, I don't want the government anywhere.
Right.
Libertarians are also much more isolationist in
foreign
general,
policy.
in foreign policy. They say, you know what, we shouldn't be involved in any foreign wars or that kind of thing.
So they'd be less likely to have the U.S. give money to Israel.
Yes.
I think actually Rand Paul was
the only Republican who did not vote for Marco Rubio's Bill S1, which was the first bill that the 116th Senate brought up that passed 77-23. Rand Paul was the only Republican that voted against it because it included aid to Israel. He is.
But historically, he's voted against aid to everybody.
He always votes against aid. So I didn't view him as doing something anti-Semitic because he has a long track record of voting against any aid anywhere.
Yeah.
That's just the way he is. 22 Democrats or 21 Democrats and one independent, Bernie Sanders, voted against it as well because it contained a portion to combat BDS. So they didn't vote for that bill as well. It still passed 77-23, and it has not been brought up for a vote in the House, which is something that I know has been brought up in NORPAC last year and will probably be brought up again this year because it still hasn't been brought up for a vote in the House. That is something that libertarians really are more isolationist than conservatives. I think conservatives realize that if you don't do something about foreign enemies now, you're going to have a 9/11, you're going to have a Pearl Harbor. Whereas libertarians are like, no, don't bother them. They won't bother us and we'll be all right.
Kind of a Monroe Doctrine type of a thing.
Sure. Yeah.
More close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, time of recording, it's been about a month and a half since the last major anti-Semitic attack here. It seems like it's been a lot longer than it has. It's only been about 6 weeks at the time of recording.
Well, that's because we've already had World War III and that ended, and Trump's been impeached and that ended, and there's been a lot of news in the last month. It's been a crazy 2020 so far.
I wanted to get your opinion on kind of the political football that has become the Jewish community. What I've noticed is that when something happens in our community, politicians like to use us as a political football to bash their opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's really all that beneficial to us. It just seems...
I don't think it's unique to the Jewish community either. I think that if something happens in the black community that's big and makes national news, everyone's going to bash each other. If something happens with guns, everyone's going to bash each other. I think that the Jewish community is one of many political footballs that likes to be used, which is unfortunate for literally everybody, but that's the name of the game in that sense. I don't like it when it happens to the Jewish community. I don't think that it's appropriate for the mayor of New York City or the governor of New York State to blame Washington, D.C., the president, on something that's happening in their own city.
At the same time, I don't think it's right for the president to be blaming the governor of New York State or the mayor of New York City. These aren't the people that are carrying out these acts.
Yes, exactly.
It's happening under their watch, but it's also happening under all of these people's watches.
Yes. And I think that most policies you need to start local and then work your way outwards. I would not say that people getting randomly punched in the street of Brooklyn is a federal issue. I would say it's a New York issue. I think that there's an issue with disrespecting police officers. I think there's an issue with the new bail reform that's coming out. I think that they're too easy on criminals. And I think that people know it. I think that there's too much willingness to disrespect cops. I think that people know it. And, that's just going to go down a dark path. I think that one of the most ridiculous things I ever read on Twitter, at least, which is a place that's a cesspool of ridiculous things, is after the Jersey City shooting, Bill de Blasio wrote a tweet that basically said something like, anti-Semitism has come to our doorstep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, buddy, you're the mayor of New York City, and Chassidim are getting punched in the face randomly on your street for the past 18 months. So, like, what?
Yeah. It's not even. I honestly don't think that's the most egregious thing that he said. That's the most blind thing that he said. Not realizing that this has been a problem for years. The problem in New York City preceded him.
I would not give him so much credit to not know that he didn't know that. I think that.
Oh no!
I would say that he was fully aware of the problem. He just saw that he was able to make a point, and so to basically he just willingly ignored the problem instead of.
I mean, he also said that that anti-Semitism is a strictly right-wing issue.
And the New York Times said that they don't report on anti-Semitism because they cannot ascribe it to a right-wing group. I mean, if it's not right-wing, it doesn't exist, and that I think is ridiculous. I think we should condemn it if it's on the right. We should condemn it if it's on the left. We should condemn it if it's in the center. I think we should condemn it if it's above, below, anywhere.
Yeah, it's also weird that the place in America where the most anti-Semitic attacks happen is in New York City.
Well, it's the place with the most Jews also.
That is true. But it's also the place that Hillary Clinton won by, I think it was 89-11. So it's not like this is a hotbed of
right-wing activity.
Yeah. Let me shift a little bit. You mentioned Twitter for a second, but I know you have a big presence online.
Yeah.
So I know that you argue online with a lot of people. Some that you know, some that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I want to focus on the ones that you know. And I think there's more of a thing for most of our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
If you have political disagreements with somebody online, how can you maintain a nice relationship with them face to face when you see them?
Well, the way I do it is you just have to go with social media isn't real life. Things you sometimes say or do on social media is something you wouldn't say to the person's face, but you have to be careful on social media as well. Try not to get too personal. You have a lot of courage when you're not in front of someone's face. try to imagine yourself in front of that person's face the next day, when you're going to davening in the morning. You got to be careful with that. And so it's important to speak your mind. I would never say don't speak your mind, but don't get personal, don't use personal information that you have on someone else to argue with them. Don't say, oh, you believe this, but what about what you do when we went to your house last week, or whatever it is. That's just a recipe for disaster. Don't ruin your personal relationships because of silly idiots and, thousands of miles away who are doing whatever they want to do. You definitely shouldn't do that. I also think that it's important to, when you do see these people, and it does get awkward, sometimes, but you got to laugh it off, and you got to understand that Twitter isn't real life. Facebook isn't real life. And it's try as best as you can to not let these things ruin your relationships.
If someone feels passionate about issues that maybe we discussed today, maybe that they disagree with you on, whatever, if somebody feels passionate, what are some practical things that they can do?
Well, there's a lot you can do.
Obviously, you can join NORPAC.
Yes, exactly. You can join NORPAC. Every single town has local political clubs that you can join, be it Democrat, Republican. You can join that. Everyone has monthly meetings if you want to do that. Honestly, go out and vote. So many people don't vote. Take a friend with you. Take a spouse with you. If you got kids over 18, take a kid with you. Go vote. Don't be afraid to talk about this. I talk a lot about, I speak to a lot of people in shul, around town, and I say, why don't you do more? Why aren't we doing more? And they're like, well, we don't want to, bring so much attention to the Jewish community. We got a lot of issues already. We already got to pay for guards outside of our shul because of somebody in California or somebody in Pittsburgh. I don't want to give anyone an excuse to come at me. I don't think we should live in fear. I don't think people should silence themselves because they're afraid of repercussions. I think that you really should, be strong about this. I think that a good example of this is right now we have the World Zionist Congress. Right. Yeah, I didn't even talk about that. But we can have a whole nother podcast about that.
Exactly. I actually plan on it.
Okay. With me?
Nope.
Good. There are more qualified people than me. Well, maybe that's not true. No, I'm kidding. Of course that's true. But that's a big thing as well. Like the World Zionist Congress, you can do some research on that. You vote. I've said this to a couple of, I speak sometimes to high schools. I actually spoke to high school recently. And what I said was, I didn't go to college as a journalism major or take advanced writing courses. I wasn't an English major like some people.
Yeah. Who are those people that become English majors?
I didn't take public speaking courses or anything like that, but I learned to write by reading. I learned to speak by listening, and you could do the same thing. I'm not saying you gotta, write for your local newspaper or, go to every meeting, but do just something. There's Teach. New York State is, or wherever you're listening, there's probably a Teach program. In that, you can volunteer for that. They're always looking for people. You can always do NORPAC, of course. You should definitely do NORPAC. You should vote in the local elections, and not just when the president's on the ballot. You got the things that are local. That affects you more than who the president is.
The more local the election, the more it's going to affect you.
Absolutely. I mean, your road is not going to get paved if Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump are in the White House. That's not going to fix the pothole outside your house. It's not. And by the way, the pothole outside your house is a lot of times more important than a lot more things in the country. And it's a harsh reality that, but you got to get to work, and if that pothole knocks out your transmission, you're really having a problem. So you got to make sure that you vote in these local elections and you stay active.
So we're running out a little bit out of time. I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions.
All right.
All right. I'm actually going to flip a couple of them on you.
Hold on. Right. Let me answer before you ask. My favorite color is blue. My favorite food is what? No, that's
keep
not
going.
Okay.
I'm not going to stop you. What is your favorite food?
I do like chicken.
I've heard. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to flip a couple of things on you.
Okay.
Least dangerous Democrat still in the election for America's future and for Israel's future.
It's a toss-up between Mike Bloomberg and Amy Klobuchar.
All right. Hopefully by the time this airs, they will still be in the race.
It's a good question.
All right. So you're a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Best place for conservatives to hear the liberal opposing point of view.
Ooh, it depends how deep you want to get in.
Let's give me a mainstream
New York Times,
mainstream media, and then maybe a podcast.
New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. Those are straight up liberal points of views. I like the Press Box is a good podcast. I think Pod Save America. I know you listen to them. I can't listen to them anymore. I like the Press Box. That's a good one.
All right. Last one. Not going to be flipping on this one, but this actually comes from a mutual friend of ours and friend of the show, Simi Cohn.
Don Zemmer?
Don Zemmer.
Oh my gosh.
The Don Zemmer. He asks, what are some specific policies you'd like to see or actions that we local Jews can take to fight or prevent anti-Semitic attacks?
Cops. I mean, you got to help the police. You got to support the police. I think that is the number one thing you got to do, because they put themselves on the front line to make sure that you are safe. Another thing is guns. You got to be able to protect yourself. Second Amendment rights are incredibly important. The Second Amendment is practically non-existent in the state of New York, especially in the city of New York. I actually just heard a talk last night about a guy who is a NRA instructor and a Second Amendment activist, and he applied to get a carry license in New York City. It took him a year. He had to go to One Police Plaza a bunch of times. He had to provide affidavits. He had to get fingerprinted. He had to get background checked. He had no criminal history except for one speeding ticket. He had to provide his entire DMV record. It's just a crazy amount of time and money and expense. And you know what? You can't protect yourself that way. If there's going to be a school shooting, it's illegal for for any teacher to have a gun. I think that's legislation that passed last year in New York State, that no teacher can have a gun. I don't think that it is responsible for a school to say, you know what, and this isn't just for Jewish schools. I think this is for non-Jewish schools too. If you're trained, if you're responsible, if you're able to do it, and you keep the gun safe, obviously. I don't see there's any reason why teachers wouldn't be able to carry in case something happens. It's an unfortunate reality of the world that we live in. But I would say that that's something that's important. So, keep people safe, cops and guns.
All right. Where can people find you, Moshe Hill?
You can find me on Facebook at A Hill with a View. You can find me on my website, ahillwithaview.com. You can find me on Twitter at the Mohill. You can find me on Instagram at instahillwithaview.
I'm seeing a pattern.
There's a lot of so I go by A Hill with a View because last name is Hill and I do have a view on things. So
I've noticed based on this conversation.
Yes, indeed, I do. Facebook is really where I spend most of my time, even though I get made fun of by teenagers because nobody's on Facebook under the age of 30, I think.
It's probable.
So I'm gonna have to up my game. But yeah.
And what about your work, your writing?
You can find me at the Queen's Jewish Link. I have a weekly column. I have submissions in jns.org, Jewish News Syndicate, the Daily Wire. That's Ben Shapiro's website. Name drop. And Daily Wire, Jewish Link from New Jersey. And, I think a lot of my stuff gets syndicated all around, especially the JNS stuff. So I've found myself in random places. So,
and one more time for NORPAC.
So for NORPAC, you can go to norpac.net to sign up. Please join us in the Mission to Washington 2020 on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. The early bird rates right now are $150 for adults, $100 for students or young professionals under 30 years old. I just missed it out by a few years. And these are the special rates that expire on March 15th, Sunday, March 15th, and they go up by $50 after that. Please sign up. It is well worth your time and effort, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Moshe Hill, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to Moshe Hill for joining me today. I just want to riff off of something Moshe said that didn't quite fit in during the conversation. As you heard, he didn't break into politics until his late 20s. I didn't start a podcast until my early 30s. It's never too late to start a passion project, or even to change careers if that's your thing. The more you're consistent with it and the more time and energy you put in, the more likely you are to succeed. As I've mentioned before, thank you to all those who keep listening week after week, those who share this show with others, and those who have left a review of the show. I'm astonished how this podcast has grown each week, and I just want to reiterate my appreciation to all of you. If you plan on going to the NORPAC mission to Washington this year, I wish much hatzlacha to you. And to everyone, as always, kol tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Swirly Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg from Journeys 4. You can email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Jewish_living. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.